Hello and welcome back to Earthbeat Visions, a history of the future sound of London. And this week we'll be finally finishing off 2009. We start with a slightly unusual release, the future sound of London, The Archives Sampler 1. Release date 2009 at some point. I always, quite naturally, assumed that this was simply a digital release of From the Archives to LP release. But no, it appears in 2009 a sampler of the first 3 From the Archives albums was sent to digital distributors with a fairly baffling track list, including some of the less popular sketch-like tracks such as Room 207 Neuro Device Send, as well as closing on a brief environment. Although I'm actually quite pleased to see some overlooked pieces like Make Contact Internal and We're Not Here present, overall, other than opening on favourites Lizard Crawl and Space Squids, I wouldn't say it's a particularly good sampler at all, missing most of the most immediately impressive tracks from the series and a number of fan favourites. Stick to the 2LP edition tracklist for a much better sampler of the first 3 releases. The future sound of London, Bestival, 11th of September 2009. There's relatively little known about this. Someone posted on the FSOL boards saying they'd been there and there were a lot of technical difficulties, Gaz was very apologetic, and certainly some of Cascade got through played. But no footage exists on YouTube and there are no reviews or forum comments anywhere. I asked Brian about it and got a quick rundown. As with the previous shows, there was a live feed going from the Church of St Michael's, Brian's home studio, to the festival, and live audio and video coming back from the festival to the church. With Bestival taking place on the Isle of Wight, there was very little opportunity for them to make an ISDN connection, so it was run via the pub nearest to the festival fields itself. Fairly early on there were significant technical problems, particularly with the video. They lost connection with the festival, video feedback from the festival stopped coming in to the Church of St Michael, and similarly video stopped getting to the festival itself. It appears also audio was struggling to get through to the festival. Gaz's partner, Diane Harris, the artist who worked with the band a bit at the time, was at the festival and with the tech guy there tried to sort out the issues, but unfortunately the tech guy was not experienced with incoming ISDN transmissions and was unable to sort the problems. Gaz in particular was furious at all the issues. At the time he was friends with Rob DeBank and wanted the show to go smoothly. He had appeared on Rob's Radio 1 show earlier in the year with the A to Z of Psychedelia. Unfortunately this was not to be. The dress rehearsal, sending transmission to the festival as a sound check, went absolutely fine, and typically it was only on the night of the performance itself that the problems happened. No known tracklist, although it's likely to be similar to that of Block and Athens earlier in the year. It's a shame that the world tour, albeit a very brief one, came to a close in a less than spectacular manner like this, especially given the hugely successful Athens show earlier in the year. Plans for live transmissions to Oslo, London and Life Festival in Ireland didn't go ahead. It seems unlikely at this point that we'll get any more FSOL live shows, meaning this was the end of a bold experiment at the hands of technology that wouldn't behave. The Amorphous Androgynous, Kasabian Support, HMV Forum, London, 21st September 2009. Noel Gallagher's to blame for this one. Kasabian's singer, Tom Meehan, had apparently been on the receiving end of a Monstrous Psychedelic Bubble Christmas present from the Oasis guitarist, and apparently enjoyed it so much that he requested Amorphous to support his band in London. And so they did. Despite their reputation as being a lowest common denominator landfill indie band, Kasabian have experimented with electronic, psychedelia and world music influences over the years, so there's clearly some common ground between the two groups. Thankfully this seems to have been the only collaboration between the two bands. No audio, video or setlist is known to exist, and this was the last Amorphous live show in this period of the band's career. The Amorphous Androgynous, a Monstrous Psychedelic Bubble Exploding in Your Mind, Volume 2, Pagan Love Vibrations. Release date 22nd September 2009. We're releasing a couple of DJ mix albums this year. I use the word DJ very loosely since I don't accept the limitation of the definition of DJ. For me it's an opportunity to collage and seek the whole history of music in hopefully a startling and entertaining way. The first one will be by the Amorphous Androgynous and will encapsulate this hard to define new psychedelia. The second one will be by FSOL. So Gaz told Freeze magazine at the start of 2008. The first volume was of course a Monstrous Psychedelic Bubble Exploding in Your Mind Volume 1 Cosmic Space Music, the compilation that returned Brian and Gaz to the public eye and birthed a whole range of remixes, live shows and of course mix albums. It's a great set and I enjoyed it a lot when I set aside the time to really get into it. Still, with the Electric Brainstorms mixes going from strength to strength at the time, I was very eager to hear the second volume curated by FSOL. Around the time of the first volume's release, Rich from Platypus told fans, "I'm yet to get a track list from Brian, the AA mix took 2 years to license the tracks. Good. I'm hoping the FSOL one will be out before summer 2009. At the time, stories posted to the news page of my FSOL site were usually quite wordy, usually in an attempt to be funny and cover all details. When the second volume of the series was announced, I may have made my feelings clear by the very succinct way I posted the news. The next volume of the Monstrous Psychedelic Bubble compilations is out on September 21st, entitled Pagan Love Vibrations. From the title you can probably tell it's not the promised FSOL volume, but once again mixed by the Amorphous Androgynous. And that's all I wrote. Happy I was not, already having 8 Monstrous Psychedelic Bubble mixes from the pod room, and bootlegs of 5 similar ones, as well as the 2 CD release of the previous year. I wasn't really excited about getting yet another, especially in place of an FSOL one. I was concerned that the success of the first volume had gone to Gaz's head and he'd pushed the idea of playing safe with a second release in the same style rather than allowing for a very different FSOL volume to potentially ruin the momentum. With Gaz talking so enthusiastically about new FSOL material and playing FSOL gigs only a few months earlier, why was the FSOL mix being sidelined? Many years later, it was revealed that the FSOL volume would have been Volume 2 Electric Brainstorms had it gone ahead, but it was never really more than a mooted idea, and as with the supposed new FSOL album discussed in 2003, it didn't represent a definite project that was actually going ahead. This was the start of the take everything Gaz says in interviews with a pinch of salt era. My remaining blog posts about the album were largely just copy-paste articles from the Gaz, Amorphous and Monstrous Psychedelic Bubble MySpace pages, highlighting a particular lack of enthusiasm on my part. The launch party for the album was to be a similar affair to the Monstrous Psychedelic Bubble tent from Green Man Festival at Matter in London's O2 Arena on 17th September, with Cranium Pie, Nick Nicely and Hawkwind returning, DJ sets by Gaz and Andy Votel, a performance by Comus, and a headline slot by the Amorphous Androgynous featuring Noel Gallagher. Only a year before, this would have seemed like unimaginable madness. Actually, it turned out to be that anyway. At first the show was put back to 30th October, and then eventually announced as cancelled. Gaz explained, Matter, largely having operated within the dance music DJ event sphere to date, was simply unprepared for the amount of production and promotion work for a live event of this scale, 7 bands and numerous theatrical interludes. This has resulted in everything being compromised to an unacceptable extent, and therefore we have mutually decided to cancel at this stage. Monstrous, however, will definitely resurface as the full-on extravaganza it was always intended to be, and maybe still at Matter. Needless to say, Monstrous did not resurface as the full-on extravaganza as it was always intended to be at Matter or elsewhere. But at the time it really did feel like Amorphous were becoming a genuinely big band with a lot of press focus on them. Indeed, the second Monstrous Bubble CD received absolutely rave reviews, with many publications playing catch-up, having missed out on the first volume. Mojo went so far as to name it Compilation of the Year in 2010. Gaz will pick up this award and give an infamous acceptance speech, which went on for a very, 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 very long time. After about 5 minutes, he remembers Brian is there. "Oh, this guy," he says, after forgetting where Brian's standing. "This guy's put up with this kind of shit for about 20 years plus." Brian is nodding and gets a cheer. Gaz eventually leaves to chants of "get off," "go away," and more. The post-award interview, which seems to have been taken offline now, featured Gaz talking a lot about the band's plans going forward and discussing music with Peter Hamill of Van der Graaf Generator, who had presented the award. Brian even got a word in. I think it was yeah, although the context was another point of frustration. Having just released Environments 3, itself featuring a bulk of new FSOL tracks, nobody wanted to hear Gaz saying that they were looking at maybe returning to see what FSOL could have to say and possibly working on new material. Way to shit on your latest album, Gaz. There's not much to say about the music on the CD. It's the now very typical selection of psych rock, prog, acid, folk, jazz fusion, instrumental groove music, modern psychedelia, film music and various associated styles with a few samples and noises placed between the tracks. 4 Amorphous tracks feature the Alicia Sufit fronted section of the Oasis remix, Billy the Onion, simply labelled The Onion, High Tide on the Sea of Flesh, which bizarrely fades out about a minute before it ends despite there being lots more room on the CD, and an unreleased mix of Elysian Fields. 11 of the tracks were on Gaz's A to Z of Psychedelia radio show earlier in the year, with a handful dating back to the earliest radio mixes, the John Williams piece coming right from the inaugural 1997 incarnation. As ever, the music dates from the mid-60s through to the year of release, with a slightly heavier emphasis on more easily licensable newer material, as with the first volume. Given that Cosmic Space Music took over 2 years to license, this one must have been either selected with licensing in mind, or the people at Platypus had learned from the experience and become experts in finding owners of obscure tracks. A few pieces are slightly different to anything from the first volume: the breakbeats of David Holmes, Melanie's gospel track, the electronic rock of Holy Fuck, the maddeningly nightmarish TV theme that is The Settlers' The Lightning Tree, a piece which goes on for about 7 years despite only lasting just over 2 minutes. But ultimately long-time fans will have at least half the tracks here on various past mixes and albums. Despite the overwhelmingly positive reviews, the compilation seems to have received a lot more criticism from more general listeners, with it comparing poorly to the first volume every time I've seen it discussed anywhere online. I'm inclined to agree. I don't think the track selection is anywhere near as successful as the first volume, with maybe a few too many forgettable mid-tempo numbers and some of the outliers being just too jarring. Melanie mixed into Holy Fuck really doesn't work. It's clearly loved by some people, but it's not something I've listened to from start to finish in many years. The art's very similar to that of the first volume, with the naked bodies this time becoming snakes instead of trees for some reason. Brian and Gaz's partners, Lisa and Diane, feature alongside Gaz himself in the shots. Elsewhere in the booklet there are shots of the live band on stage, Gaz with a harp, Brian and Gaz in the studio, Gaz with his daughter, Brian with a bongo, and a gnome with Brian's face. The inside rear cover advertises the 8 Monstrous bubble mixes available in the Podroom, as well as the 3 Amorphous albums and the Oasis 12-inch. No sign of the New Love Poetry, 2012 or Wobbly Ooscapes this time. The usual array of terrible fonts is on display, although much of the text is in a much more readable typeface, thankfully. There's a double-page spread of press remarks about the first volume, including Noel Gallagher quotes. Most of the usual suspects are mentioned in the thanks section, starting with family, management and the Amorphous live band. All 4 members of Oasis are even name-checked. Instead of new text this time, the booklet features an interview with Too Cool to Die published earlier in the year. As with the first volume, the CD is long out of print, and with Platypus now closed and all licenses with the label ended, the chances of a reprint are somewhere between 0 and 0. The Amorphous Androgynous, a monstrous psychedelic bubble exploding in your mind, Volume 8, the Podroom, the 7th of November 2009. As part of the promotion for the second monstrous psychedelic bubble exploding in your mind CD release, an 8th volume of the radio series was produced for release exclusively through the Podroom. This wasn't the only mix produced to promote the album, with several short 15 to 20 minute mixes, some even running to half an hour, produced for various websites such as The Quieters, as part of articles discussing the record. Still, the thing I like about this mix is the completely new batch of tracks, many quite different to previous MPB selections. The 90-minute mix runs through the usual gamut from psych folk to acid rock freakouts, mellow prog and cosmic electronics, with environment, spoken word, samples, and the now very familiar range of Amorphous Androgynous watermarks. Nothing here has been included on a past mix though, although several pieces would go on to be included on the third CD release in the series. A list of artists was offered on FSL Digital and, as ever, doesn't seem to quite match up with what's on show. Apparently there's exclusive Amorphous material in here, and it might be the sitar, tabla and metallic percussion piece near the start, although that seems unlikely. No other unknown tracks seem to fit the bill at all though. Drum Circus and the Cosmic Jokers are two more which I've yet to identify, and although there are two spots these tracks could occupy, neither seems to really fit the bill, as these two later pieces are both live recordings of instrumental space rock bands. Pierre Cavalli's opener is a surprisingly hectic sounding piece for a Monstrous bubble mix. Neil Young is a refreshing and surprising inclusion, not an artist I would normally associate with Amorphous. The jazz of the Heath Brothers was easy to identify through its famous use as the backing track in Naz's One Love. The Kinks are another group whose appearance took me by surprise here. The Hollies bring a very welcome and much overdue whimsical 60s psych pop spin to the series, a very underused sound in my own view. The Panama Limited Jug Band's comedy bluegrass is a wonderfully ludicrous moment. Stereolab are paired up with Noi in either a great moment of satire or simply an enjoyable mirroring. Prem Joshua's tribal ambient new age track is a completely new direction for the series. Boredoms continue the exploration into modern space rock. David Graham's intense folk fingerpicking is another slightly different sound, and Tortoise's electronic tinged post-rock sounds remarkably technological in comparison with everything around it. For me, it's one of the better Monstrous psychedelic bubble mixes, with an incredibly diverse range of music and comparatively little crossover with other entries into the series. Although a further radio mix has been broadcast since, this was the last to receive an official numbering. As with most of the group's mixes, it was removed from the pod room in 2012, although a slightly rearranged and truncated version can be heard on the Monstrous Bubble Mixcloud page. And with that, we come to the end of the 2000s, or the noughties, or the aughts, if you like. A decade which began with the band in a seemingly never-ending silence, having released nothing for years, no interviews, no music, nothing. And that year ending with an unpromoted Gaz DJ set, then moving through the Amorphous Psychedelic era into FSL Digital and Monstrous Psychedelic bubble periods of the band, starting with nothing at all and ending on their most productive years to date. Of course, these years would have nothing on many of the years to come. Please do leave me a comment down below. I'd love to hear what you think of the music discussed here. And there's also share, subscribe, like buttons you might like to press. All interaction really helps my channel. And I'll be back next week with the first video of 2010. I do hope you'll join me then.